Welcome back, WNST, Tassel, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively talking sport of baseball around here. I'll say this. We're about a week and a half, 2 weeks out on starting the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. We're going to be letting ourselves play 31 crab cakes and 31 breweries throughout the state, all around the city. Going to get a little thirsty next month. All brought to you by our friends at Goodwill as well and our friends at Window Nation. Got the new shirt on here. I got my new windows coming in. And our friends at the Restaurant Association of Maryland sponsoring Restaurant Week. That's coming up in September. I'll be telling you about that as I make you hungry with broiled and fried crab cakes. There's only one thing that makes the crab cake taste better, and that's beer. Luke, and it's especially beer that's cold this time of year, and the beer is cold right now, right? This is an uncanny thing, and when I start to see the statistical and the how many years it's been since they've won 3 series in a row, how many years it's been since they won 10 games in a row, I would just say this: for all these years, and when 2012 happened, it had been 14 years, really into the 15th season of awful. We're not that far in this time around, right? Like, you're now a young old timer. You remember the last awful run, and it just reminds you of how awful's been even when they were pretty decent for 5 or 6 years with Buck, and there was a whole era of baseball with legendary players. They're doing stuff now with Mateo and Urias in the lineup, and nobody hitting 275. And they're winning games and they're pitching. And this has just been a very, very uncanny. And I know Buster Olney's getting annihilated by these goofs in the fan base. They're supposed to be a last place. They were still a last place team a day and a half ago. But this is the kind of enthusiasm that you can't buy, you can't plan. They weren't planning for it. Mike Elias is smart, but he wasn't smart enough to think, oh, we're not going to lose for a month in July, right?
Yeah, I mean, no one expected this. I think even the most optimistic Orioles fans were hoping to see some progress. I remember talking to you at the beginning of the season, and look, I felt like I was being overly optimistic because I picked them not to lose 100 games. I think I picked them to lose 97 games.
Makes you a cockeyed optimist.
Yeah, right. Seriously. And the one thing I'll disagree with you about a little bit is, what was different about the last 5 years compared to the 14 straight losing seasons was, you're talking about 3 of those years being 108 plus losses. I mean, you're talking historically terrible. I mean, there was a reference to the 1890s Louisville Colonels as far as some of these factoids that we're seeing, but it's just been remarkable. And you're talking about a team now with a double-digit winning streak and a chance to go into the All-Star break as long as they have an okay, if they win 2 out of 3 down in St. Petersburg, even if they lose 2 out of 3, they'll be at the 500 mark at the All-Star break. So, it's something that no one could have thought of. The idea we're talking about a team that's, at or slightly above 500 in mid-July. It's crazy. It's what you're talking about, one of the 12 longest winning streaks in franchise history, which, we forget, but this team from the 1960s through the mid 1980s, pretty darn successful.
Used to be a legitimate franchise, as I remember it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it was a very, a historically successful franchise for the better part of 2 decades. So it's just been a lot of fun. And I think the timing of them going to Wrigley, there were Orioles fans that were planning to make the trip already, right? I mean, they don't go to Wrigley that often. I went out to Wrigley in 2008, saw Rodimus Lees win a ball game out there. I sat in the bleachers and was a great time. So there was some of that worked out nicely for this 2-game set against the Cubs. But how can you not watch that? Even just watching it on Masson and hearing the "Let's Go O's" chants and seeing the fans, behind the dugout and all that, and just think that this is what it's supposed to feel like a little bit more, and they're not there yet, and they still have a ways to go.
But if people wonder why I'm pissed and why I did Free the Birds and why I've held the spotlight on their awfulness and what should be their shame, quite frankly. I mean, they're a shamefully run franchise. I mean, really still are when you can't get their games when their broadcasters are watching pop flies on a television screen. I mean, there's still a lot of half-assed going on. But when the baseball wakes up, that's why we're all there. You're there for it to be relevant, for it to be fun, for it to be engaging, for you to have players you want to root for, that you actually want to root for the laundry, to steal Seinfeld's phrase 30 years later, that you want to be engaged in it. And, I hate to steal songs and phrases, but every night it's a different star, right? I mean, that's the magic of Oriole baseball, and that's kind of what's going on, because this isn't Adley Rutschman hitting 420 when he comes up like Jim Traber or Bill Ripken, or being some sensation, or Fernando Mania and all that. This Nobody's having an all-star career. I mean, so much so that their closer's going to the all-star game next week. We were all scratching our heads a week ago wondering whether they're going to have an all-star, who it was going to be, right? And so it's not that. It's more, I think it's pitching. I think they play better defense than you think, or you give them credit for. And I don't know. They don't give bats away. I mean, saying that, this is, especially not since Rutschman came up the last month and a half, they're getting productivity out of 206 hitters. They're getting innings out of Dean Kramer, right? I mean, like, this could not have been predicted. I mean, you could have predicted that Mullins hit 330 again this year, and you would say, well, he did it. There's a lot of things going on here that were not predictable, I think, especially the way they're winning, because you do look at it and you say, well, where's their clubber? Where's their, what's the special sauce in what's doing this over not just 2 weeks, but they're a 500 team now over half a season. That you could say, well, they won 10 games in a row to get there, fine. But we're not judging them on this week. We're judging them on the body of work here.
No question about it. And I mean, you mentioned a couple of the points. The defense has been really good. I mean, statistically, it's been very good. Especially you look at them up the middle. You have Cedric Mullins in center field. Jorge Mateo, as much as you can talk about the bat, and I still look at him long-term as probably better suited to be utility infielder, pinch runner off the bench because he can fly. Plays really good defense at shortstop, though. The bat, we're going to have to continue to see. I still see Gunnar Henderson and Jordan Westberg at AAA long term, but he can pick it and he can play it. And you mentioned Adley Rutschman. First of all, take out the first 15, 16 games or so. Since then, he's raked. I mean, he really has. He was off to such a slow start. We saw another RBI double on Wednesday night's game. But you see him behind the plate on a nightly basis. You see why there was so much hype about him from a defensive standpoint. Not even so much about the throwing, which is good, but it's the receiving, it's the framing, the strikes that he steals over the course of a game, over the course of a week, and
leadership. Don't forget the leader. Like,
no question about it.
It's very clear with him with pitchers and the way he looks at pitchers like he wants to go home with them. You know what I mean? Like,
no question about it. And I mean, they've pitched well, specifically in the bullpen. They pitched well all year, and over the last month or so, we've seen the rotation, which. Nestor, I think the craziest thing, you mentioned how they haven't had that, no one's having that slam dunk all-star caliber season. They have guys that are having good seasons, and certainly some guys that are having surprising seasons in terms of, former waiver claims out of the bullpen and whatnot. But if you had told me back in late March, when the lockout had ended and they're down in Sarasota and they're playing, these Grapefruit League games, if you had told me that they were 45-44, I probably would have said, well, John Means is having a huge season leading the rotation, and Grayson Rodriguez probably got called up at some point in, I don't know, late May, early June, and those guys are leading the way. They're not out there. I mean, John Means is recovering from Tommy John surgery. We heard him on the Masson telecast the other night. By the way,
entertaining.
Yeah, no question. He's got a future there if he wants to do that one day. And Grayson Rodriguez is still in Sarasota rehabbing the lat strain and doing well, but guessing we're probably not going to see him. If we do, it's going to be September. So
I don't know. We got a pennant race around here.
I know, right? Who knows? But the fact that they're missing those two, the fact that, Kyle Bradish, who we were talking about a ton, and he had that lights out, incredible outing in St. Louis back in May, but he really went sideways and is on the IL right now. Bruce Zimmerman's at AAA.
I was getting ready to say my pal from Fadley's, who looked to be, the number 3 or number 4 starter for a little while, just on being local. And what he was doing wasn't good enough. Certainly not good enough for a team that's now in a pennant race, right?
Right. So you just look at that, and it kind of wows you to think, wow. You look at what we thought the rotation might be and what it is, and about the only thing about it, Jordan Lyles has been better than I thought he would have been, but not dramatically better. You knew he'd give innings, just like he did on Tuesday night. He gave him 7 strong innings. not necessarily pitching as well as he's pitched at times, but that was kind of the one known commodity once John Means went down. But you see what Tyler Wells has done, especially even with him being on a workload limitation. And you mentioned Dean Kramer. For every guy like Bruce Zimmerman, there's been Dean Kramer has gotten his career back on track. He was awful last year. I mean, he truly awful last year, and he's given them a chance. And they've gotten innings from Spencer Watkins and Austin Voth, who was booted out by the Nationals several weeks back. So it's just been a lot of craziness in that way. And look, how much of it's going to be sustainable on the pitching side, I have questions about it, because Tyler Wells, we know, is not going to be a guy who's throwing 160 innings. He's going to be limited just because of where he was last year innings wise. So at some point, you do wonder what the starting pitching is going to look like, what trickle down effect that's going to have on the bullpen. But for right now, you've won 10 in a row. And the funniest thing, when you and I woke up early to break down the Cubs series and look ahead to this Rays series before they go into the All-Star break, which, by the way, the draft's Sunday night and they have the first overall pick too. So that's not bad.
You better not screw that up, right?
When you're looking in the big picture of things. But yeah, well, sure. But I'm just saying,
but they're not
something
doing
else
this
for the
off of their
mojo. But
awfulness and all their 1-1 picks, right? I mean, Rutschman's up, but other than that, the Heston Kerr stats, this hasn't borne fruit, right? They gave a kid away for a bag of beans the other day too, right? So like they're not doing this by their awfulness alone. That has not been part of the industriousness of we're gonna. Like in Houston, where they just had all these number ones who kind of came to fruition. You'd like to think that that's where they're going to be in 25 or 26 with the kid they're going to draft on Sunday night, right?
No question about it. Whether it's Drew Jones or one of the other high school,
he will play with Adley Rutschman. He better.
Yeah. Oh, no question. I mean, you can't screw up 1-1. I mean, but it happens. It happens.
So Popple.
Yeah, no question about it. Mickey Moniak for the Phillies, who has been trying to fill in for an injured Bryce
Harper.
Harper.
Phil Nevin come out there the other night, and I remember back in the day when he was, guy, right?
Poor Phil Nevin and the Angels. But that aside, I thought what was interesting, I can recall how many different times you and I and lots of diehard Orioles fans that are still bleeding the orange and black and drinking the Kool-Aid and all that can think back over the last few years, fan graphs and some of these different sites giving the Orioles at the beginning of the year literally a 0.0% chance of making the playoffs. Well, taking a look at Baseball Reference, as the Orioles get this 2-game sweep at Wrigley, 15.4% chance to make the postseason, which, by the way, is still not overwhelmingly impressive, but grading this thing on a curve, wow. That's wild. Even where they were 3 weeks ago compared to now, it's still, I'll still say what I said to you just recently, that, I'm still looking at this thing from a big picture sense, a global perspective, as Mike Elias put it, in terms of they still have work to do, and you can't get too caught up in a 10-game winning streak. 99, that Ray Miller team that, they won 13 in a row in September that year. The 1987 Orioles had a 11-game winning streak. So, that you could still have some teams that aren't that great go on some of these winning streaks.
Yeah, it doesn't help you if you go 2-8 after the end of all this, and you do it against the Yankees and you do it against the Rays. Well, this is where this is where you find out whether you're really in a pennant race or not,
right?
Because things will fall apart quickly against your competitors. It's one thing to go beat the Cubs up or go beat the Angels up or steal a couple of games from the Rangers or whatever, but these are the ones, and this is going to be different moving forward, right? This balanced schedule and unbalanced schedule, this is sort of the end of the David Goliath thing that they've dealt with, but this is also the time of the year where, this is going to have to happen for them.
No question. I think you just look at the reality of what happens before and right after the All-Star break. If you're going to lay out a legitimate argument for this potentially happening for them, first of all, look at the rest of the AL East beyond the Yankees. Red Sox scuffling. Tampa Bay is hurt. Wander Franco with the hamate bone. Kevin Kiermaier just went on the IL. They have a slew of guys that are hurt. And the Blue Jays just fired their manager. So there's some turmoil, despite the fact that you have this AL East with 5 teams above 500, and which is just crazy. The other 4 fine, but the Orioles being where they are, but 3 at Tampa Bay. Then you come home, you play 3 against the Yankees at Camden Yards, and then you have a 4-game set against the Rays after that. If you hold, even if you don't have to go 8-2 over that stretch. If you just hold your own and not be in a position where you go 2-8 or 3-7, you then have 3 with the Reds, 3 with the Rangers, and then you have a 3-game set with the Pittsburgh Pirates. I mean, there you go. I mean, there's a stretch of games against teams that have worse records than you. So you've got a chance then to be in a position where you're right around the trade deadline. And I don't know, maybe you are 6, 7, 8 games over 500. I mean, am I predicting that? It's tough.
Well, the prediction would have to be where's the cutoff to make the playoffs? How many wins do you have to have, right?
Sure. Well, and again, this is where we go back to what does the trade deadline look like? And I know, Ken Rosenthal was writing about this at The Athletic, talking about the fact that, okay, maybe you can be some combination of a buyer and a seller. Maybe there is a deal to be made for trading Anthony Santander, but he mentioned a name like Blake Snell, for example. I mean, the Padres are going to be looking to try to stay under the luxury tax threshold. Blake Snell signed through next year. Is there a fit there? And again, that's just one spitball idea, but can you do something that, one, is not going to damage you too much right now? And I don't think there really is.
Well, you don't want to do that for the fan base, right? Like, last thing you
want to do. For the fan base, for the clubhouse, everything,
dude,
right?
Effing up a year when you have a chance. Don't tell these young guys you don't have it. Don't tell them you're not going all in. Don't give me that nonsense.
Well, I don't agree with going all in. You're not going all in at the trade deadline.
All in is not all in. I mean, you're trying to win. Try to win.
Well, but what does that mean?
All in wouldn't mean dealing a prospect for
and that's what we're talking
rental.
About. That I'm not doing any rentals. If I'm going to add something, I
agree with that.
I want someone who's at least under club control for next year, and that's why I said the Blake Snell thing would make sense. Someone who isn't having a fantastic year when you look at the ERA, but some of the peripheral numbers look better than what you would think. And he's a former Cy Young Award winner, and he's making, I think it's $16 million next year. I mean, this team has payroll to add. I mean, even if they're not going to become a $150 million payroll like they were in 2017, they certainly can add payroll. So
even if you believe Means and Rodriguez are going to be there, and you can believe Hall, you believe whatever you want, having a veteran pitcher in the front, it's something they did in their worst years. In their worst years, they went and rented the Mets leftovers famously a couple of times. Sometimes they were renting the Mets famous wife some years. So, I mean, they rented Kevin Millwood. They bought players all the time like that. And again, this really does speak to ownership and who's running the place, because that's going to be where the decision comes from. This isn't Mike Elias's decision to take on money. Anytime he's going to take on money, he's going to have to talk to John, and I guess John and Lou aren't speaking. So, there is the dysfunction of the whole place over the course of time that works against them to some degree in my mind. But this is a chance that if you're in a race, and I'm going to say this again and again, and you and I are going to argue about this, I'm sure, you don't give the season away this year. If you get a chance to play one playoff game, if you get a chance to go to the last game of the season to have a chance to make the playoffs, you better do what's possible to do that. And part of that isn't giving Santander and Mancini away for a bag of baseballs. And I don't think they're going to do that. I mean, I think Brick Garoli made a case that everybody was, why to keep Trey Mancini. You better make a case on why to get rid of him. When you're making these deals, why are you going to screw with the only thing that's been good around here in a while? You're not going to get anything back of real value to bust this up. This is too good to bust up right this moment. I wouldn't even be thinking about that. I know it's hard because All-Star game's late. August 1st is right around the corner if you're thinking like August 1st. But they got to be thinking like August 1st now. They have to think like a team that has a chance. I don't want to say dare I say to win the World Series. I think that's stupid.
Yeah.
I think a chance to do something for the fan base, for their own players, for the organization, which is give it a real run. These guys have earned the chance to have a real run now, not we're going to deal Mancini off because financially it saves us 10 cents. I mean, that's who they are. So, like, for me to just say, well, they're smart, they make great decisions. No, they don't. They don't they got brothers fighting with each other up top. So who knows what they're really thinking about September. I know this, they're doing these cheap ticket giveaways. We talked about that. If you want to go out there for $40 and wander the ballpark for the next month, you can. I think that's great. I mean, I was downtown at Pier 6 this weekend. I'll be downtown. By the way, a free plug. Saturday from 10 until noon, I will be at the Babe Ruth Museum with Keith Cavanaugh from Terrapin Times. They're having a card show. I'm taking all my Louis Aparicio cards down there. Keith saw my cards on the internet. So you got to bring a collection down here. I want to see it. So I'll be down there from 10 until noon on Saturday, greeting baseball fans. So, I mean, I'm in the spirit of things, and this is why I'm such an a-hole. This is why I'm so pissy over 30 years, because this hasn't happened. So now that it's happened, they better not be dealing Trey Mancini off for a bag of baseballs a week from now. And if they deal Santander, I mean, I'll hear what you're saying about picking up a $16 million pitcher next year who has some pedigree, because they're going to need, if they are thinking about next year, that's a good thought. And, I'll tip my cap to Rosenthal. He knows more about this than anybody, but they better not turtle up here. And if they lose a couple of games in the next week and a half, they shouldn't burp about that. I've seen enough of these guys to feel like, let the kids play. And if they're not good enough, fine. But you're at a point now where you get the fans excited. Don't screw that up. Don't screw this up.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of look at this thing, and I really feel like the path of least resistance might be less is more in this situation. I mean, if you're selling me on the clubhouse and the good mojo, and look, I've told you about that. It's a close knit group, lots of young guys, some of the veteran guys
in the water in Chicago. I wouldn't get in that water.
Sure. So, but with Trey Mancini, with other potential deals they could make, what are you really getting? If you're getting something that's going, if someone wants to absolutely knock your socks off on a deal to try to get Austin Hayes, I'm still thinking in a big picture sense. I'm considering anything like that if they're going to overwhelm you. But if you're talking about a Trey Mancini deal where, look, you're going to get a couple lottery tickets. I mean, that's just a reality. He's a bat first base. He plays a little bit of outfield, but he's not an outfielder. He's a first base DH type for 2 months. That's not going to net you very much. We know how prospects are valued in today's game. So I'm much more of the thought of,
and if you're in a pennant race, you need
as much as anything else.
A pennant race.
As much as anything else, I'm just more in a let it ride and let's see. First of all, let's see how the next couple of weeks play out, because if you do go 2-8 over the next, these next 3 series against the Rays and the Yankees, then you're in a different spot, and you need to be realistic about where you were. Like I said, there's nothing I would do in terms of trading any prospects of real value. But if you are in a position to add, it would be someone that's helping you next year. Because to me, I still, and I wrote this at BaltimorePositive.com, this is still, for me, as much as anything else, crystallizes what you mentioned, going for it next year in terms of you're trying to build a playoff team next year, and you're spending some money, and you're looking what's out there in terms of pitching. You're trying to assess them. That's one reason I'd like to see Jordan Westburg and Gunnar Henderson up in the majors, at some point, whether it's mid-August, whether it's September. One, I think they could be an upgrade over what you have in the infield right now, which, like I said, I love Mateo's glove, but you look at what they've gotten offensively, it's pretty limited. It's limited.
The other night now, come on, won a couple games in Chicago.
But he has a 600 OPS. I'm just looking at this pragmatically, but I look at those moves, and if you want to make an argument for being a buyer, as much as anything else for me, it's call up DL Hall, call up Jordan Westburg, call up Gunnar Henderson at some point here over the next 3-4 weeks, and see if you have some upgrade.
Right? Yeah, okay.
And even if you're not talking about that being enough for 2022, get those guys acclimated so they're ready to hit the ground running on opening day next year, rather than piddling around, and then you're kind of, because we even saw with Adley Rutschman, it takes some time. You've seen some stud prospects around baseball struggle this year early on, and there is an acclimation. And I think the pandemic lost season for these minor league prospects, I think it's hurt guys, not just for the Orioles. I think around baseball, you've seen a little bit of an adjustment period there, maybe a little more than otherwise expected. So, for me, I'm much more interested in seeing that. And, I as I've talked about Trey Mancini before, I still think there's something to be said about what he wants ultimately. And I thought that, a month ago, I thought that even a couple weeks ago, in terms of, if the Orioles don't keep this up, what does he want? Does he want to go to a contender? Does he want to let it ride here? But I'm sure right now, when you're talking about a team that's won 10 in a row and above 500 in mid-July, and you look at the wild card picture and you look at the rest of the AL East, sans Yankees, and you see some issues with some of these other teams, you know, you can start to believe a little bit more, but we'll have plenty of time to continue to talk about that. And as you mentioned, I'm sure we'll disagree and argue a little bit, but boy, this is fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I'd much rather talk about this than Lamar Jackson and Bernard Pollard fighting on Twitter and all that, which was just something. But it's just
Lamar.
it's
the more.
well, I don't want to get into that.
I mean, we get into that. Fighting with Bernard Pollard is.
Oh, like, Bernard Pollard's kind of been a jerk talking about him for the last 3 years too. If you followed him, so I'm not going to just say that this is. I'm not going to just dump on Lamar about this by any means, because I think Pollard said some over the top criticism of Lamar that doesn't fit with what the body of work has been. But
Bernard
my point
Pollard's
is,
a fool.
Right? Sure.
Well documented in Purple Rain too.
Right. So, and I didn't bring that up because again, I don't have any interest in that. It's
I'd rather talk about winning baseball.
Bernard Pollard hasn't played in years. Here. Exactly. So, and that was my point. I'd much rather be talking about a ball club that's playing good baseball, and nice win on Wednesday night, and they're getting solid outings from the likes of Spencer Watkins, and you look at the bullpen. I mean, any night you can stay away from Jorge Lopez and Felix Bautista, and your second tier guys can do a nice job. I mean, that's one thing that's really we've talked about it, and we've talked about it even before this winning streak. I mean, the number of former waiver claims in the bullpen, and you just look. I mean, even look at someone like Brian Baker, who he's got an ERA just under 4.5. He hasn't been anything special, but for the most part, other than just someone they call up because they need a fresh arm, right? Doubleheader, rain out, whatever it is. You look at their bullpen, though. It hasn't just been Lopez and Bautista. It's been Ciano Perez and Dylan Tate and Joey Crable and Keegan Aiken. I mean, you just go down the list. I mean, their core guys in the bullpen have been consistently solid for them at worst.
It has the bullpen to fourth or fifth inning every night, right? Like it's not. There's going to be a lot of bullpen here, especially moving forward. I mean, the rest of the year, because they're not stretching out starters. To your point, they have starters that's going to be the exact opposite of stretching them out.
And that's again where I do take some pause. If you're asking me to, what concerns me right now, I mean, you have to look at the rotation and say, all right, are you going to continue to get a sub-4 ERA from Spencer Watkins? Is Austin Voth going to continue to pitch to a 3.8 ERA since he became an Oriole? So you look at that. Tyler Wells, we know he's only got so many bullets left in terms of innings in the second half of the season. But again, that's where I say, hey, DL Hall looked really good again at AAA Norfolk the other night. And, you hope you can get Bruce Zimmerman straightened out, and Kyle Bradish is going to come off the IL. Not saying all three of those guys are going to enter the rotation and be great, but if you can get at least one or two of those guys to step up, then that puts a little less burden on the bullpen, and you hope that the bullpen can continue what they've done. Because I
would say, where is our Miguel Gonzalez and Wei and Chen? Where are they coming from this year, right?
Yeah. Well, Tyler Wells has been one of them. Former Rule 5 pick, who was their closer at the end of last year. I mean, it's been incredible. But again, what the innings limit is going to look like. So, there's still plenty that you can point to and say, they've got 49 games left against teams that are above 500, and 42 games against the AL East. So I mean, there's still a lot that they're going to have to overcome. And I mentioned, just because you have a long winning streak doesn't mean that that's suddenly what you are. But just enjoy it. For whether you're all in on wanting them to be a buyer at the deadline, or whether you're not believing this, enjoy this, because it's been fun. And I said this to you long before a 10-game winning streak, that they're playing better baseball. And if you've been watching that on a nightly basis, even before 10 straight wins, you've seen that. You've seen better defense. You've seen the bullpen, timely hitting, even if no one individually is having a monster year at the plate. Certainly guys that are having solid years at the plate. So, I mean, it's just enjoy the ride. I have no idea where this is going. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to fall apart. I'm not going to sit here and say that they are going to make the playoffs either, but when something unexpected happens, and I think 2012 was a great lesson of this. We spent most of that season waiting for the other shoe to drop, and guess what? It never did. And I think a lot of fans and pundits kind of failed to, they kind of missed out on just how much fun it was, how improbable it was. So when something like this happens, it's like being at the table in Vegas, right? You just let it ride. It's a hot streak right now, and yeah, they're gonna lose some games again, and then they'll go through some struggles again, but it's fun, and you just see the enthusiasm they have, and you see the fans that made the trip out to Wrigley, pre-planned because it was a rare trip to a major league cathedral. But it worked out to being a really, really cool showing for the Orioles. And you could tell, hearing from Brandon Hyde and some of the players in the clubhouse after Wednesday night's win that, that it was appreciated having the support on the road and hearing the "Let's Go O's" chants and whatnot. It's pretty cool. It's something that you're used to seeing other fan bases come into Camden Yards. Nice to see the Orioles have a chance to do that for once.
I'm going to have to get my trumpet back out to play the beginning of the Oriole Magic. Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore. Luke, you can find him out on anywhere on social media, Twitter, Facebook. If you have breaking news, it'll happen first on the WNST tech service. All brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford. Dennis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, and again on Sunday morning, driving you home. I am on respite from the Maryland Crab Cake Tour just for a little while, 2 weeks down. We're going to crank things back up on August 1st, go all over the state. We got plans for Western Maryland, some plans in Frederick, plans over on the Eastern Shore and Salisbury and some other places. So we are looking forward to that, as well as 31 breweries. So all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We'll be letting ourselves play all month long. Our friends at Window Nation. I got my Window Nation shirt going on here, my peace sign. New windows coming in later on this month. I found my Goodwill truck. I still have not had the truck come over and get all the spring cleaning I've done. Now I'm doing summer cleaning, so you can add into that. And our friends at the Restaurant Association of Maryland, where they'll be hosting Restaurant Week in the month of September. Hope you're making your plans to support local, buy local, take care of local people. We're as local as it gets. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, talking about the most unlikely thing. The Orioles above 500 at the All-Star break in the pennant race. Pinch me. Sounds like a Bare Naked Lady song. Stay with us.